There are a handful of moments in a soldier's life that burn themselves into memory, not because of the violence, or the noise, or the medals, but because of the silence. The kind that comes when you realize your uniform doesn't make you untouchable. Not to your country. And certainly not to your family. Mine came on a breezy fall afternoon outside the Eisenhower Military Hall, standing in full dress blues, 4 silver stars pinned to my shoulders. And still, I wasn't on the guest list. I'm going to need you to step aside, the young officer said, not quite meeting my eyes. I adjusted my gloves. You want me to step aside, I repeated. He nodded toward a clipboard. General or not, if your name's not on here, I can't let you in. My name wasn't missing by mistake. I wasn't overlooked. I was erased. I turned my head slowly, watching families pour into the building, cousins, aunts, commanders, wives, girlfriends. One woman wore a sequined red dress like it was a gala. Another carried a bouquet so large it blocked her view. And there I stood. The highest-ranking woman in my family, and arguably in the entire base. The only one not allowed inside for my younger brother's promotion to lieutenant colonel. A promotion I helped secure. Before we go further, allow me to kindly ask, if stories of strength, dignity, and rising above make you feel seen or inspired, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. It helps us share more stories like this with people who need them. Thank you. Now, back to that moment. The second-hand shame on the young officer's face was almost enough to make me pity him. Almost. But pity wasn't the point. Boundaries were. My name is General Alexandra Mitchell, 4-star general, combat veteran, and former deputy commander of Joint Strategic Operations. But to my family, I was always just Lexi, the one who didn't cry at Dad's funeral and who couldn't take a joke. The one who was too strict, too serious, and too much. It never mattered how many commands I led. How many soldiers wrote to thank me. How many foreign dignitaries saluted me first. To my mother, I was a woman who didn't bake. To my brother, I was a woman who wouldn't bend. To my father, before he passed, I was the soldier who made him feel small. They always feared my strength, because they couldn't control it. And when my brother, Captain Daniel Mitchell, was up for promotion, who do you think reviewed his file? Who advocated to the board during internal deliberations after a small red flag came up? Me. And I did it because I believed in merit. In service. In helping family. But apparently, Daniel's idea of repaying that was striking my name from the event list and telling his wife to keep it intimate. As if I were a political risk. Truth was, I had outgrown the box they built for me. And nothing threatens small-minded people like a woman who refuses to stay in their boundaries. So I stood there, watching my brother's promotion ceremony unfold from behind tinted glass, like an outsider at a celebration I paid for. It was humiliating. But it wasn't unfamiliar. Growing up, Daniel was the one with charm. The kid who could skip chores with a wink. The boy who cried at the right time and always made our parents feel needed. I was the child who followed orders and held everyone accountable. He played piano. I polished my rock medals. He told jokes. I memorized the Geneva Convention. He was praised for effort. I was punished for excellence. One Christmas, I remember walking into the kitchen wearing my West Point sweatshirt. My mother looked up and said, "Couldn't you have worn something softer?" I was 20. And I learned that day that even pride makes people uncomfortable when it doesn't look the way they expect. But the ceremony, that day, that final insult? That was the last straw. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't fight the guard. I turned on my heel, got into my car, and drove straight back to the base. I logged into the Defense Personnel Network and marked my family's names, Daniel's included, as non-clearance visitors. They didn't just forget me. They tried to erase me from the very structure I helped build. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and opened an old leather journal I hadn't touched since Kandahar. Inside were old notes, dates, names, lessons. But on the last page was something I'd written years ago and forgot. Power isn't how loud you command the room, it's how silently people clear the way when you walk in. They had cleared the way, all right. And now it was time for me to walk, not into their events, but into my own legacy. The next morning, I contacted Lieutenant Jenna Collins, my former adjutant, and asked her to organize a press event for a female leadership roundtable I'd proposed months ago. I wanted it scheduled. Broadcast. Prominent. And I wanted it to happen on the same day Daniel's promotion announcement hit the defense newswire. Not to overshadow. To contrast. You see, the point wasn't to humiliate anyone. It wasn't vengeance. It was clarity. Let them celebrate backroom promotions. I would showcase real leadership. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Pentagon's main conference auditorium, shoulders squared, hair pinned, dress blue sharp, and took my seat in front of a dozen cameras. And this time, nobody turned me away. The press conference was over, but the ripple was only just beginning. By noon the next day, clips from my keynote address at the Pentagon's Female Command Leadership Roundtable were circulating on LinkedIn, Twitter, and a few high-level defense blogs. It wasn't viral in a TikTok way. It was quieter, classier. The kind of buzz where lieutenant colonels quote you in their opening statements and generals nod when your name's mentioned. That morning, Daniel's promotion hit the official defense newswire. But by lunchtime, he wasn't the only Mitchell trending. I didn't post a single thing about the family snub. I didn't name drop. I didn't need to. Excellence has a way of making noise without ever raising its voice. But my sister-in-law, Madison? She cracked first. Someone must have asked her about the obvious elephant in the room. Why Alexandra Mitchell, one of the most decorated generals in recent memory, wasn't present at her own brother's promotion ceremony. And Madison, bless her tightly curated Instagram-ready heart, responded like a woman who was prepared for everything, except the truth. Alexandra was invited, she told a local military lifestyle blog. She had a conflict. She was supposed to speak at some woman empowerment thing at the Pentagon. Honestly, we were really sad she couldn't be there, but we respect her schedule. At first glance, it sounded harmless. Civil, even. Except for the part where it was a blatant lie. Because I hadn't been invited. Not to the ceremony. Not to the dinner after. Not even to the email thread organizing who brought what for the reception potluck. And what Madison failed to anticipate was that her statement would trigger a follow-up question from someone much smarter than she was. The journalist interviewing her, a retired Navy officer named Tanya Griffith, wasn't just a blogger. She was a former communications strategist for CENTCOM with a PhD in strategic narrative warfare. And she hated being lied to. The day after Madison's quote made rounds online, Tanya published an op-ed titled, "Missing Star at the Ceremony, Why General Alexandra Mitchell's Absence Speaks Louder Than Protocol." In it, she broke down the contradiction like a seasoned tactician dismantling a weak perimeter. If General Mitchell's absence was simply a scheduling conflict, why wasn't it addressed publicly by the family or included in the official program? Why weren't her decades of service and direct influence on Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell's career even mentioned? She included screenshots of past interviews where Daniel credited me with being the standard I aspired to. She even pulled old tweets from Madison's account complaining about how intimidating it was to plan a wedding with a sister-in-law who thinks in bullet points. Ouch. But the real dagger came in the final paragraph. Families can be complicated. But so is leadership. And if the next generation of military officers is watching how we treat the women who blaze the trail, let's hope we do better than door lists and photo ops. That piece exploded. Suddenly, my inbox was full of speaking requests. Daniel's promotion announcement was buried under related articles about female erasure, familial sabotage, and gatekeeping in defense circles. And Madison? She deactivated her Twitter account by noon. Daniel sent me a text the next day. "You could have just said something." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then typed back. "I did. For 20 years. You weren't listening. I didn't send it. Not yet." Instead, I forwarded his message to my aide and said, "Log this. I want it printed in the archive folder under When They Realize Silence Isn't Submission." He chuckled and said, "Yes, Here's the thing about people like Daniel and Madison, they rely on the benefit of the doubt. They weaponize politeness, hoping you'll fold to avoid making a scene. They thrive in the assumption that strong women won't break ranks for the sake of appearances. But I wasn't breaking ranks. I was rewriting the whole chain of command. A few days later, I got a formal invitation from the Secretary of the Army. He wanted me to serve as a strategic advisor for a new initiative focused on leadership culture, integrity, and family systems in military support networks. It wasn't just a panel. It was policy. Madison and Daniel had thrown a party to celebrate a single man's promotion. I was now helping restructure the leadership values of the next generation of command officers. But still, I wasn't vindictive. I didn't gloat. I simply moved forward with clarity. Until I got an email from Mom. Subject line: "Can we talk?" Inside, a short message: "I think this has all gotten out of hand. Whatever happened at the ceremony, surely we can move past it. Your brother's hurting. I'm sure you are too. Let's not let this drag our family down." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a polite request to let the whole thing quietly disappear so we could resume pretending we were close. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed that email and placed it next to my original ceremony denial memo from base security. 2 documents. 2 voices. One telling me I didn't matter. The other begging me to forget it happened. I wasn't interested in either. Because what neither of them understood, what people like them never seem to grasp, is that women like me don't seek revenge. We seek accountability. And when we can't find it, we build better tables, with our own damn nameplates, and never beg for a seat again. It had been 3 weeks since the op-ed. 2 weeks since the invitation from the Secretary of the Army. 6 days since Madison's influencer contract was quietly terminated by a military spouse brand that wanted to maintain alignment with empowerment values. But what I didn't expect was the name that lit up my caller ID at 5:42 a.m. Everett Mitchell. My father. Retired U.S. Army Colonel. Former commanding officer of the 41st Infantry Brigade Combat Team. A man of few words, and even fewer apologies. I let the phone ring until the final vibration. Then I picked it up. "Hello." His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Dry. Weathered. "Lexi." I stood by the window, watching dawn push light across my backyard garden. Silence filled the space between us. It wasn't awkward. It was loaded. "I saw the Pentagon clip," he said. "I waited. You looked sharp." "That all?" I asked, careful to keep my tone flat. A pause. Then a sigh that sounded like it had been aging in his chest for decades. "I owe you something," he said. I sat down. "You were right," he continued. "They erased you." "They?" I said. "You were never exactly a defense witness." He gave a hollow chuckle. "Fair." Then came the words I never thought I'd hear from my father. Words that hit like a classified briefing detonating in the middle of a training ground. "I told your brother not to invite you." My breath caught. He kept going. "Madison was worried about press. Daniel said you'd overshadow him. They brought it up at dinner." I said, "She's her own storm. Let her stay outside." Silence. "And you thought that was fair?" I asked. "No," he admitted. "I thought it was easier." He wasn't wrong. It was easier. For them. But it wasn't just the ceremony. It was years of passive complicity. Of watching me get passed over, talked down to, policed in tone and posture, because it's just how families are. "So why are you calling now?" I asked finally. He exhaled. "Because you didn't get bitter. You got better. And somehow, in all my years of command, I missed the one soldier I should have followed." I felt the burn in my throat before I could speak. But I didn't let it out. "Not yet. There's more," he added. "Of course there is," I muttered. "You were always your mother's threat," he said. I froze. "What?" She never said it aloud. But she didn't have to. She'd watch you walk into a room, all precision and poise, and I swear to God she'd physically recoil. Like your competence was a mirror she didn't want to look into. I didn't respond. He kept going. She softened Daniel. Mold him into a version of herself she could champion. But you? You were iron. She couldn't bend you. And it scared her. I felt something shift in my chest. All these years. I thought I was imagining it. That maybe I was too harsh. Too proud. Too unforgiving. But it wasn't my pride. It was her fear. And he had watched it all in silence. "You were the daughter who outpaced both her parents," he said. "And instead of being proud, we panicked." He paused. "I'm sorry, Lexi. I truly am." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then I whispered, "I would have saluted you for honesty a decade ago. But I don't know what to do with it now." "I didn't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just didn't want to leave the truth unsaid." I ended the call soon after. No ceremony. No "I love you." Just a goodbye and a throat full of thoughts I couldn't sort yet. That night, I opened my father's old field notebook from his final deployment. On the inside flap, in faded black ink, it read, "A commander's silence is a message, too." I closed it, and finally cried. The next morning, I showed up to the Military Leadership Culture Initiative wearing civilian attire. We weren't talking combat. We were talking legacy. I opened the session with something raw. My name is General Alexandra Mitchell. My rank is earned. My voice, however, took longer. Today I speak not only for the soldiers I've led, but for the child inside me who waited 40 years for her father to say, "You were never the problem." Somewhere in the back, someone stood up. A young black woman in army greens. Captain stripes. Strong gaze. Permission to speak freely. Granted. She stepped forward. With respect, your dignity and strength are why I joined. But hearing what happened to you, even with 4 stars, makes me wonder what hope the rest of us have. I didn't flinch. Exactly why we're here, Captain. So that someday, dignity won't require resilience. It'll be the standard. She nodded, tears in her eyes. We finished the session with handshakes and gratitude. But that night, something unexpected arrived. A letter. Handwritten. From Daniel. "Alex. I didn't want you there because I knew you'd outshine me. You always do. And instead of being proud to stand beside you, I let my insecurity make the choice. Madison regrets it. So do I. But mostly, I regret forgetting that I wouldn't even be in uniform if you hadn't paved the damn way. I'm sorry, Daniel." I folded the letter, slid it into my desk drawer, and sat down. I wasn't ready to forgive. But I was ready to breathe. Because the silence that haunted me all these years was finally breaking. And this time, I wasn't the one cracking. The invitation came embossed in gold. The 25th Annual Mitchell Family Military Legacy Banquet, hosted by none other than my mother. A proud tradition she insisted we resume after a 5-year hiatus due to logistics. Translation: Daniel finally had a title she could brag about again. The envelope was thick, weighty, and elegant, like it wanted to say, "We're polished, we're composed, and nothing happened." I almost laughed. Inside was a note from Madison, in her signature flowery handwriting. "Dear Alexandra, we would be honored if you joined us this year as our guest of honor. It's time our family recognized you the way the world already does. With love and pride. Madison and Daniel." Love and pride. The audacity. They were asking me to be their centerpiece, the shiny redemption arc they could point to at a podium. A 4-star general back at the family table. Look how far we've come. Except I hadn't gone far. They had just looked away. But still, something inside me said, go. Just not on their terms. I picked up the phone and called the banquet director listed on the RSVP card. "Hi, this is General Alexandra Mitchell," I said. "I'd like to confirm my attendance, but with a few conditions." He hesitated. "Of course, General. What would you like?" "I'll need the seating chart updated," I said. "I won't be sitting at table 1. "Oh? That's the head table," he replied. "I'm aware. I'd like to be seated at table 19. That's the junior cadet table." "Exactly." He was silent, probably wondering if I had misunderstood the glamour of my assigned spotlight. I hadn't. I was rewriting the optics. See, I didn't want a front row seat next to a mother who once called me too intimidating to marry, or a brother who only respected my rank when cameras were flashing. I wanted to sit among the kids still building their dreams. The ones scribbling notes and hiding their ambition in polite smiles. They were my people now. The night of the banquet arrived. I wore a midnight navy sheath dress, simple, structured, no medals. No stars. Just me. Alexandra. People turned. Whispers flitted like wind through crystal glasses. She's here. That's her. The general. The sister. I nodded at the head table, gave my mother a single, civil smile, and made my way to table 19. 8 cadets, all under 22, sat with wide eyes and stunned expressions. One of them, a South Asian girl in rock uniform, nearly dropped her bread roll. Permission to freak out, she blurted. Granted, I said, smiling. Why are you sitting here? Another cadet asked, straightening his posture. Because your table is the only one I haven't been pushed out of, I replied softly. They didn't know what to say. So I changed the subject. Tell me about your ambitions, I said. And don't hold back. And they didn't. One wanted to work cyber intelligence. Another dreamed of becoming the first female drill sergeant in her unit. One young man whispered he was afraid he'd never make it because his father told him men like him didn't command. I grew up in a house like that, I said. The others leaned in. Let me tell you something, I said, looking each one of them in the eye. Leadership isn't granted. It's claimed. One earned choice at a time. And every time someone tries to shrink you, remember this, they're just afraid of the size of your shadow. Applause broke out across the room. But it wasn't for me. It was because Daniel had just taken the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, smiling with that practiced charm. Before we celebrate our military legacy tonight, I'd like to personally acknowledge someone who taught me what leadership looks like when no one's watching. General Alexandra Mitchell, my sister. He gestured to the head table. I stayed seated. All eyes turned. The silence was seismic. Then one cadet at my table whispered, General, he's trying to fix it. I took a breath and rose, not to approach the stage, but to gesture for the MIC to be brought to me. Confused, the host quickly scrambled over. I took the microphone. Thank you, Daniel, I said. And thank you to everyone here. I appreciate the acknowledgement. A pause. But I'd like to share something tonight, not as a general, not as a sister, but as a woman who has spent her entire life being told where she does or doesn't belong. I scanned the crowd. Even my mother looked stunned. I was excluded from a ceremony that should have been family, I said. I was told indirectly, and sometimes directly, that my accomplishments made me unapproachable, intimidating, unwelcome. People shifted in their seats. I sat at this table tonight because these cadets haven't learned how to pretend yet. They haven't perfected the politics of proximity. They just show up. And they dream. And that's who I serve now. The cadets looked like they were witnessing a TED Talk with body armor. I smiled. If I'm anyone's guest of honor, let it be theirs. Because they haven't erased me. They made room for me. I handed back the MIC and sat down. You could have heard a pin drop in that ballroom. Daniel blinked, lips parted. Madison turned red. My mother slowly lowered her champagne flute without sipping. And across the room, a young cadet began to clap. Then another. And another. Until the applause wasn't coming from table 1. It was coming from the back. Where the future Saturday. That night, I didn't wait around for the speeches or the photo ops. I hugged every cadet at my table, left through the side exit, and drove home with the windows down. Because this time, I hadn't been excluded. I had chosen where I belonged. And no banquet table, no matter how glossy, could ever compare to the power of walking in as yourself and leaving with your integrity untouched. I was sipping black coffee on my porch when the diplomatic envelope arrived. It was thick and sealed with the golden insignia of the Forces Armées Françaises, the French Armed Forces. Inside, an invitation to receive the Ordre National du Mérite, France's second highest military honor, for my contributions to strategic international defense cooperation. A surprise, even to me. Apparently, one of my field strategies from a NATO exercise 5 years prior had quietly shaped cross-border operations in real time, and the French government had been watching ever since. It was humbling. And it came with a televised ceremony in Paris, press coverage, and a quote from the French Minister of Armed Forces calling me a diplomatic tactician with the heart of a commander. But as fate loves irony, 2 hours after the envelope arrived, I got another delivery. A manuscript. From my mother. No note. Just a thick binder titled, Honor at Home, The Mitchell Family Legacy. On the title page, by Evelyn Mitchell. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it like a ticking device, one you didn't know whether to disarm or detonate. Eventually, curiosity and dread won. The chapters were neatly ordered, just like her linen drawers and staged fruit bowls. Each child had their own section. Daniel, the rising star. Caroline, the teacher and peacemaker. And me, the enigma. That was the title of my chapter. I should have known then. My section began with, Alexandra was always different. Unyielding. A mystery even to us. And it spiraled from there. She described my childhood with clinical detachment, as if she'd raised a brilliant but emotionally defective robot. Alexandra didn't cry when her goldfish died. She didn't cry when she broke her wrist in high school. We worried about her. Worried? No. They misunderstood me. They punished me for strength they didn't possess. Then came the spin. When Alexandra made the choice to pursue a military career, we were supportive in the ways we knew how. But her path was solitary. Supportive? They'd called it a phase. Said, "You'll grow out of it, just like you did ballet." When I shipped out to West Point, my send-off included a casserole and a warning not to get too harsh to be lovable. But this manuscript, it was fiction parading as family history. The worst part? She had already sent it to a publisher. That night, I called Daniel. "Did you know about Mom's book?" He hesitated. "She sent us drafts, yeah. And you didn't think to warn me?" "She said it would make things better." I laughed. For who? Silence. I hung up. I wasn't going to beg for truth. I was going to publish it myself. The day I flew to Paris, the media buzz was already hot. Female general. American. Decorated abroad. The headlines weren't just celebratory, they were symbolic. The ceremony at Les Invalides was elegant and quiet. French uniforms gleamed. Medals clinked gently. And when I stepped forward to receive the order pinned to my chest, I thought of how my mother would have narrated this moment. Alexandra was never sentimental. She didn't need applause. True. But I needed recognition. Earned. Honest. Without spin. The French minister shook my hand and whispered, "Your reputation speaks before you. And it says, lead with truth." I flew home with a medal in my bag and resolve in my bones. I hosted a press conference 3 days later, not to brag, but to correct the record. I've recently been made aware that a memoir is being published about my family and our military lineage, I began. While I support narratives of legacy, I feel it's essential to address where fiction has been mistaken for fact. A reporter raised a hand. "Are you referring to your mother's book?" "I'm referring to any book that tries to dilute reality for the sake of making the past prettier." I paused. My mother once said I was emotionally inaccessible. What she didn't say was that I grew that armor because vulnerability was treated like weakness in our house. Another hand. "General, are you planning a rebuttal?" "No," I said. "I'm publishing the truth." I had already signed with a publisher, my own memoir. Stars aren't given, they're survived. And in it, I would tell everything. The ceremony I wasn't invited to. The childhood I was asked to soften. The mother who mistook dignity for distance. The brother who feared being outshined. The silence that shaped me. The medals I wore for the battles they never saw. No rage. No vengeance. Just truth. Because contrary to popular belief, the best revenge isn't a MIC drop. It's a mirror. And I was about to hold one up to every page they tried to write me out of. The book dropped on a Tuesday. By Friday, it was already on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list. Stars Aren't Given, They're Survived sold out within 48 hours, driven by military circles, women's leadership forums, and even high school civics classrooms. It was being called a literary field manual for integrity by the Washington Post, and the memoir every daughter of silence should read by Oprah's book club blog. But more than that, it sparked something. Women from all walks of life, enlisted soldiers, lawyers, teachers, nurses, stay-at-home moms, started posting about the book, underlining passages like battle scars. I was told I was too much. Turns out, I was just enough for the future I built. We weren't raised to lead. But we weren't raised to fold either. They erased me. I rewrote myself in bold. They tagged me. They messaged me. Some sent photos of the book next to family portraits they no longer spoke to. It wasn't just my story anymore. It had become theirs. And somehow, even with all that momentum, the most unexpected moment came via a handwritten card. From my mother. "Alexandra. I read the book. It hurt. But not because you lied. Because you didn't. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that even in silence, I watched you. And somewhere along the way, I confused my envy with disappointment. The fault wasn't yours, Mom. That was it. No dramatic apology. No denial. Just truth. At last. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just closed the card and stared at it for a long time. Because what do you do when the parent who once muted you finally acknowledges the volume of your voice? You breathe. And then, you choose what comes next. The Mitchell family reunion wasn't technically a reunion. It was branded as a casual appreciation lunch, hosted by Daniel and Madison at their country club. A few months had passed since the book release. Long enough for emotions to cool. Long enough for Madison to stop being scared of bumping into a quote of hers in a grocery store book aisle. I hadn't planned to go. But then Daniel called. "Dad's not doing great," he said. "Some test results, it's not terminal, but it's not great." I paused. He added, "He asked if you'd be there." I wasn't expecting that. I hadn't seen Colonel Everett Mitchell since the day he told me the truth, the one day he admitted he failed his daughter long before the ceremony snub. I agreed to come. But I brought something with me. I arrived 15 minutes early, not out of politeness, out of strategy. The country club dining hall was prepped like it was a wedding. Round tables, white cloth, glass pitchers of tea and lemonade, strategically placed Mitchell family photo boards in every corner. I was dressed sharply, but not extravagantly, black tailored pants, soft cream blouse, and a simple lapel pin of 4 small stars. Subtle. Direct. Mine. Daniel spotted me first and offered a hesitant smile. "Glad you came." "I had a few hours to kill," I said, sipping from the water glass already at my seat. He chuckled nervously. "I deserve that." I didn't correct him. Madison approached next, less smug than usual. "Alexandra," she said. "I wanted to say, your book was powerful." "Thank you." It made me uncomfortable. Then it did its job. She laughed, but it was the nervous kind. She cleared her throat and retreated to the buffet table. My mother sat 2 tables away, speaking to Caroline and her husband. She hadn't looked at me yet. And then, my father entered. Older, slower, but sharp-eyed. He didn't say anything when he saw me. He walked up and simply tapped 2 fingers against his temple. A salute. Not military formal. Just recognition. I nodded back. And that, strangely, felt more intimate than any hug could have. The lunch dragged. People made speeches. Daniel toasted. Caroline thanked the women in the family who've held us together. My name was not mentioned. But I wasn't waiting for it. Because I hadn't come to be acknowledged. I came to acknowledge them. When the toasts ended, I rose. "Before we clear out," I said, tapping my glass, "I'd like to say something." All eyes turned. I know I wasn't the expected speaker. But I wasn't the expected daughter either, was I? A few nervous laughs. I scanned the room. When I wrote my memoir, it wasn't to attack anyone. It was to preserve the truth. Because for far too long, I've let others tell my story in pastels and passive-aggressive footnotes. Daniel lowered his gaze. "Today, I want to say one thing. I don't need this room to love me. But I need this room to respect me." Silence. I've been called many things. Intimidating, cold, distant. But not once did I fail in my duty. Not to this country. Not to my team. And not even to this family. I looked at my mother. And while I accept that some people only understand love through silence, I've chosen to speak. Loudly, clearly, and with purpose. I reached into my bag and pulled out 10 sealed envelopes. Each one contained a signed copy of my memoir, with a handwritten note inside. I handed them to Caroline. "Distribute them as you see fit. I'm not here to perform. I'm here to leave exactly what I've earned." With that, I nodded once and walked out. No drama. No confrontation. Just clarity. Weeks later, I got a letter. From Caroline. It read, "I always thought you were trying to be better than us. Now I see you were just trying to be you, without apology. Thank you for not giving up on integrity, even when the rest of us gave up on honesty." And with that, something unexpected happened. My story stopped being just a chapter. It became a compass, guiding others, challenging families to see women not as ornaments, but as origin points. Because the truth is, I didn't wear 4 stars to be worshipped. I wore them to remind every young woman watching that survival is leadership. That presence is power. And that sometimes, they don't have to salute you. As long as they can't ignore you.